Hello, everybody. This is Piero Giorgio, author of Survive the Economic Collapse. I'm today in Tunisia. Behind me is the Lake of Tunis. I'm here on July 2nd to think and spend some time about the terrorist attacks of last Friday. Now, I had to give a conference, so this was a good opportunity to meet some local authorities and also some authorities from foreign countries, especially Britain, who came here as uh, a large amount of the 38 people killed last Friday on the beach of Sousse were British. Now, what's interesting for me is that, of course, I know this country very well, and it's very interesting to reflect how the economic collapse can come to a country like Tunisia, which is fairly peaceful. Sure, it had some major political changes recently, but has a peaceful culture and certainly a setup with tourism and with a fairly good economy. And it's a small country, well-educated people that in general roughly works pretty well, which is not common these days in this region. Now, suddenly you have two terrorist attacks in 6 months, which obviously target the tourist industry, such as one of the main museums, and that happened last March, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly, and obviously last Friday on the beach, a single gunman took out an AK-47 that he hid in an umbrella and started shooting at tourists on the beach. What's interesting is that my first reaction when I heard about this second attack is to say, well, who wants Tunisia to be harmed? Because obviously tourism is a big industry. And obviously the first usual suspect, as these terrorists were claimed by, is of course ISIS, the Islamic State, Daesh, whatever name you give it. And when you know, and we know for a fact now, that this organization has been funded by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and obviously trained and equipped by the United States, first in Syria, but also in Libya. And Libya having been destroyed by Nicolas Sarkozy and Obama and Cameron, now is a fucked up place which is a training ground for terrorism, which is a shopping mall for weapons, including anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles. And clearly, suddenly you have these guys, in this case, a young student, who suddenly is brainwashed into becoming a terrorist. They enters this organization, goes to Libya, gets trained, comes back with weapons and ammunition, gets a plan, is told when to attack and where, goes on the beach, and with fairly good training, reasonable training, goes on the beach and starts to shoot 38 people. And shootout lasts 40 minutes. Now, interestingly is that most of the people on the beach actually didn't react to the shootings. They heard a few shots, and then another, and then another, and they thought it was fireworks. They thought it was an entertainment. They thought it wasn't dangerous. And this again, guys who prepare, think, react. If something sounds dangerous or looks dangerous, it probably is. Run, act according to your training. That's why it's important to get trained. Seek cover, seek hiding places, seek protection, run away from the danger. Especially on the beach where you're basically butt naked. You don't have your M4 with you. You don't have your protection. So this is again to think about the real dangers that can happen anywhere. It can be in a cinema, it can be in a train, it can be in a traffic jam, it can be every day, everywhere. So we have to be ready. To come back to Tunisia, what's interesting is that clearly these terrorist organizations, which are funded and organized and trained by the usual suspects, they don't attack at random. They attack because they have been given carte blanche, they have been given authorization to attack. So clearly, what is happening in Tunisia that pisses off the empire, that pisses off the US and NATO? Because, look, as much as I like American people, let's face it, US government is a fucking bastard. And over the last decades has just organized terrorists around the world. From 9/11 to everything else in Iraq and in Syria and Libya. So, look, there's a big problem. And I'm not saying it's all the US government. But clearly, the ones who pull the strings are deep into that. So what can we do? What can Tunisians do. Where clearly you have to think, for example, simple thing, even on the beach, bring your cat, bring your tourniquet, bring your bandages. You never know. Maybe you can help someone, and not. It doesn't have to be terrorist. Maybe it's a car accident. Always have the minimum kit on you to help people or treat yourself and your family. And another item is also think when you should travel and when you shouldn't. Now, statistically, even a terrorist attack like this, it's a drop of water in the ocean. It's 40 dead in a 10 million people country is nothing. I remember in the 90s, everyone was scared to go to Israel because once a month there was a few dead people because of a kamikaze attack on the bus, on some places. Now, I used to go in Israel at that time, and there was no danger. It was, okay, sure, once in a while, bad luck, you're in the bad place at the wrong time. The terrorist, which has initiative, gets to do what he has to do. And therefore, you're tough luck, and that's when you need preparation. If you have concealed carry permit, carry your guns, and so on. Now, the issue, of course, is that the economic collapses that I speak in my books, of course, we can see them today. We can see them in Greece. We can see them in Puerto Rico. We can see them starting to accelerate in the periphery of the economic system. A collapse never happens at the core. It happens first in the periphery. It happens in the worst part of town. It happens in the poorest countries. And then little, by domino effects, it starts to reach in the core to a point where suddenly what is considered a fairly slow collapse suddenly accelerates, and you can have suddenly a real collapse which can happen very fast. Think of Argentina in 2001. Think of Zimbabwe in the 90s, in late 90s. Think of all the economic massive downturns that can happen over a weekend. Now, we should never forget that economic collapses can be triggered by outside or perhaps even random events. Okay, this one I don't believe it's random. But suddenly you have a terrorist attack, two terrorist attacks in 6 months on the tourist industry, which is one of the biggest part of Tunisia. This single attack cost the economy $500 million, which is big for the size of Tunisia. And that means that people are canceling their holidays, and the impact of that is on travels, on organizers, on the services, on the hotels, on the entertainment industry, or on the food, everything, all the supply chain, all these industries that live on that tourist industry are hit and are becoming severely impacted by a single guy in one event. So economic collapses for the individual can happen very fast, very quickly. Think of all the people who will lose their jobs because of that. Now, that means we also need financial preparation. That means we need to seek the more autonomy as possible. That means we need to reinforce the social bonds we have with the people around us, with our friends, our families, and because they can help us in case of problems, as well as we can help them in case of problems. So all of these approaches, of course, I explain most of them in detail in my books, are very important for us, because if we want to be responsible fathers, mothers, citizens, we need to think. We just don't want to wait for the government to help us. The government is overwhelmed, and it was never meant to do all that. It's our duty to protect ourselves. It's our duty to protect the people around us. It's our duty to protect even the government. Because the government is at our service. It's not the other way around. And we should acknowledge that it cannot do everything. Sure, it has the police, it has the army, but you will always be reactive. It's very difficult to be proactive on such things, whether they are organized or random. So it's also our duty to be responsible for our families in terms of economic collapses and economic dramas for people. Save money, put it on the side. Don't put it in the bank. Save it in tangible assets, in tools, maybe in some gold, in silver, but also in your skills. And that's chapter 5 of my book. How the skills that you can learn can help you to have jobs that can keep on during bad times, but also that are skills that are always valuable, and therefore you can always do something. And maybe you're not on the payroll of a company, but certainly you can work for people in exchange of goods and food and anything and everything. So We are entering a very dangerous and difficult world. I think everyone has noticed that. And thankfully, there are people, of course, I hope to be part of them, but there's many, many people who have written, who have acted, and who are sharing what they're doing, their thoughts, but also their example on how you protect yourself, how you create independence, how you work resistance and strength in difficult time. Strength in all sorts of ways, economic, physical, etc. So think, prepare, and look, if you live in Tunisia or if you're abroad, doesn't matter. I really wish you good luck and really think that this summer 2015 is going to be very hot in many ways, in more ways than one. And we are entering very dangerous times, and you really have to think and prepare yourself. Take care.